Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. It is hotting up around the world, at least. MotoGP is pretty quiet at the moment, but temperatures soaring, particularly here in the UK over the next couple of days. If you hear any buzzing in the background, that's my fan. I don't do well in this type of heat. It's not for me. Anyway, we will power through because Dovi is officially done after 2022. We'll also take a look at Moto2 and particularly the wonder kid, Pedro Acosta, who's had a tough start to his rookie campaign. More sad news as Suzuki, though, officially confirmed they will leave MotoGP and are closing down their endurance team at the end of this year. More positive updates, however, coming from Marc Marquez and Honda, and we've got some of your questions still to answer. The recording date is Monday, the 18th of July. My name is Harry Benjamin. Joining me as ever is Crash MotoGP editor Pete McLaren and former Grand Prix rider and British champion Keith Huewen. Now, Keith, let's start with Dovi. If we can all make our way through the blistering heat that is currently coming into our homes. Dovi officially done. We've spoken about it already in podcasts gone by that, well, his time looks like it was written on the wall anyway. He said himself if he wasn't competitive, he didn't want to continue. And, well, he hasn't been competitive, and he has now confirmed that he's not going to continue after 2022. So it seems like the right decision all round.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? The longest break that we've had for a summer for some time, thanks to the Kimi ring dropping out, has given us so much more to talk about, even though there's usually nothing to talk about at this time of the year. Dovi had to be due. It couldn't continue the way it was. He's of that age. If he'd have been competitive, I think we could have seen him go on for much longer, but it just isn't happening. There's only Quartararo who can make the Yamaha work at the moment. They're not going in the right direction for Dovi, so it was the writing was on the wall ages ago. I mean, I'm surprised it took him this long to actually get round to that conclusion, but we're there now. I feel a bit sad, I've got to say. I always rated Dovi quite highly. I always liked him in the paddock. He was always a gentleman. He went around his business really, really well, really nicely. He was one of those quality individuals in the paddock. So I think we are losing someone more important that I think, with a cursory glance, you might not think that much of. You know, Dovi's one of those guys that sort of, he's a front runner at MotoGP. He was a top man, and to be losing someone of that quality, even though he's been on the slippery slope for a little while, is sad for me. I mean, I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I feel slightly sad that we've now got to that announcement. Inevitable, maybe, but now that we've got there, it does feel a bit sad to lose Dovi.
Well, it's another big name, isn't it, Pete? Sort of going from the top class. Obviously, last year, Rossi, Dovizioso, although runner-up many times, never quite got it, but 24 Grand Prix wins, 15 in the Premier class for Honda and Ducati, as Keith says, a top rider, going out in not the way that I think many would like him to, but he himself highlighting the competitiveness of that Yamaha bike. Only Fabio Quartararo can ride that, and emphasizing how narrow that performance margin is on the bike. And he just saying, well, I just can't find it, so I can't do it.
Exactly, Harry. Yeah, I mean, almost from the moment he got on the bike, didn't he? He realized this is a bike that has to be ridden in a certain way to go fast. You can understand why he took this deal, you know, this offer. I mean, on paper, a full factory Yamaha, equal spec to the guy who won the World Championship last year. You know, there's a lot of guys that would jump at that chance, but as Keith says, it just hasn't worked out. Dovi is the first guy to realise that. Keith did a good job there of explaining his personality. You know, he's a very down-to-earth guy. He doesn't walk around with a superstar ego or anything attached to him. You know, he would have just looked at this and realised this is the situation. You know, it's not happening this year. He doesn't want to be in MotoGP at the age of 36. He's the oldest guy on the grid. If he's not enjoying it, he's not competitive. He's always been on the podium, basically, apart from that first year at Ducati in 2013. He's not used to this situation that he's in now. And this isn't a surprise. But as Keith says, and you say as well, it is sad. It is sad that he's leaving. You know, he comes from the 125 class. You know, he was a world champion there. There's not many guys left, is there, on the grid? He's probably the last guy. Aleix will be the next oldest at 32. But, you know, Dovi came through that staircase of 125 two-strokes, 250 two-strokes. Didn't win the World Championship in 250, but he was on the Honda. He was loyal to Honda when it wasn't the 250 bike to be on. And that's what got him into MotoGP, the fact that he could fight for the championship in 250s, even on the Honda. Came into MotoGP a year on a satellite bike. Then he took over from Nicky and Repsol Honda. Got one win, but, you know, those years at Ducati, I mean, 2017 especially, I mean, who would have thought he would be the guy to step up and fight Marc at the time. I mean, we'd seen people beat Marc, but Dovi outraced him, didn't he? Those last lap battles, it was incredible. The way he sort of rose up to the occasion and stayed there, took the fight to the final round in 17, runner-up again the next 2 years. And then really the writing was on the wall from 2020, that change of rear tyre, just like Petrucci, his teammate, lost that sort of, hard braking ability that was so much of, a big part of their strength on the bike. And really he didn't recover from that. And then you can understand why he went to Yamaha, as I say, not just the bike spec. He had that 1 year on the Tech 12 bike that went fantastically. And I think that kind of led him astray a bit. I think he kind of looked back at that and went, that was, 6 podiums he had on that Tech 12 satellite bike. And he thought he could pick up where he left off. He'd been on the Ducati for so long, a bike that wasn't good in the corners. The Yamaha should be the opposite. So you can see why he went for it. On the other hand, there will always be that slight what if he'd have taken the Aprilia ride. He was testing for Aprilia. He could have been on that bike this year. And you do just wonder. But it was interesting, as you say, Harry, the interview with MotoGP.com, and he spoke about these one-rider bikes, the Yamaha, the Honda with Marquez, and he said, and also a bit the Aprilia. And that was quite interesting, I think, that he perhaps feels that the Aprilia, you look at the championship, Aleix second, Maverick 12th. I know Maverick's got on the podium now, so maybe he will be able to sort of widen the rideability of the Aprilia and make it suit different styles. But interesting that Dovi perhaps thought the Aprilia also fits into that category. But you know what, I think it is a shame to go out, obviously, with the results as they are for him. But it's a bit like we said with Rossi. At the end of the day, it always ends in this way, because if you're winning or you're doing well, you keep going, don't you? And so, yeah, I think this will just mean he goes into retirement knowing that he gave it everything he's got. He'll go off to motocross. I mean, he loves motocross. That will be part of his future, no doubt. Will he be a test rider? That's the other thing. Will he go back to test riding? Who knows? But yeah, it's certainly looking like the last, it would be 9 races of Dovi's career. So let's hope that he can have a few strong races to finish off this, really, really impressive career, long career, 20 years in Grand Prix.
It is a really long time, isn't it? And yes, you say, well, I think he said in that interview, well, I've already tested retirement and it was all right, so I'm okay with going back there. So we wish him all the best for the remaining races of this season, and hoping that he can do better than 11th at the moment. It's been the best result so far for Dovi this year. So but confirmation, then that does leave Aleix Espargaro as the oldest rider on the grid for next year, 32. From the oldest rider, I should say. Oh dear, I've done it. Slap on the wrist. From the oldest rider in the paddock to the youngest, one of the youngest riders, Pedro Acosta. He was, man number 1 last year. We were talking about him, Moto3, smashing it left, right and centre, setting the world alight. Talks maybe he'll do a jump straight to MotoGP, Keith. Snapped up, I think all the manufacturers are trying to snap him up. In the end, it was KTM, but the champion making the move to Moto2 this time around hasn't been easy. Those are his words. Of course, pole at Le Mans, crashed out of the lead, had a broken bone so far this year. He did win at Mugello, but it's interesting, isn't it, how maybe we expected too much from him, do you think, coming into Moto2, a tough class, and he is still so young.
Yeah, perhaps we did expect a bit too much, but only because of what he showed us in Moto3 at the end of the day. I mean, he was mercurial on that. He was he was a little bit special. He could make that thing dance. He could do things with it, make the passes that looked almost impossible on Moto3. It hasn't quite translated just yet to Moto2, but I still believe it will do. I mean, that kind of incredible talent that he has, the feel he has. It's a bigger jump now, Moto3 to Moto2, than it was before. The bikes are much more powerful, much more work that you're putting your body through as well, which you won't have been used to. So probably that transition to Moto2 has not been quite as sharp as he would have wanted to be, which makes the likes of Darren Binder going straight into MotoGP, and obviously before him, Jack Miller going straight into MotoGP, just goes to show you what a major step that is and was for those two individuals. I think Acosta is, he's been clattered a bit this year as well. We could say that he got away with a few near misses last time out in Moto3, but now Moto2, it's been a steep learning curve. He's going to have to get used to that. Maybe he's going to come back after this break, reset, and rewrite the second half of the season. We'll wait and see.
I think the speed is there, isn't it? As Keith's saying, that's the key thing. He's got the speed. Yes, he hasn't put it all together. It's been messy at times, incidents, penalties and whatever else. I think there's never a good time to break your leg, but I mean, he got that win, didn't he? And there were 4 races before that. He didn't even score a point. Now, you imagine if he got 4 races without a point and then he'd broken his leg in training as well. At least while he's recovering, he knows he's stood on the top step. He knows he can do it. He just needs that little bit of experience. And now he can look over across on the other side of the pits, of course, and see Augusto Fernandez fighting for the world title. And, that can also be useful for him because, he's not in the title fight now. That expectation is obviously gone. It was there at the start of the year. He was fastest in pre-season testing. Anything was possible. He now knows that's out the window. So really the pressure's off and he can use this second half of the year, learn from Fernandez, refine, build on what he's already learned. And let's hope he can, pick up where he left off before the injury and be a lot more prepared for next year when you've got to believe he'll be one of the title contenders.
Well, he is still, Keith, top rookie after all that. And he believes that the thing he still needs to improve on is his 1 lap pace. But that seems to sort of, it's his racing that seems to be a little bit on the weak side. But he says, actually, is it the 1 lap pace that's then going to make myself more consistent and fighting for the wins? Have you seen that on the track as well?
I think what he's talking about is 1 lap pace. He's got to put himself in a position where he's able to fight at the front, and that motivates you still further. So it's a situation where putting yourself mid-pack in a grid of quality, as Moto2 is, puts you at a disadvantage straight away. He's not quite got it there yet, but I think Pete's absolutely bang on right. It will come. He's got speed. He's been a little bit unlucky this year. I mean, anybody else, would we have been heaping this amount of pressure on anyone else anywhere? No. It's because he had such a stellar time in Moto3 and he looked so special. That specialness hasn't gone away. That's inherent. It's still there. It's going to come back out again. If not this year, we'll see it next year. But Acosta is a man for the front. He'll be podium soon enough.
And as the man said, Moto2, Pete, wouldn't be as fun if it were easy.
That's it. Yeah, and I was just going to say, MotoGP teams looking more into the future, they don't forget those kind of seasons that Acosta had last year. We're talking about Fernandez now. He had a great year last year. Look at what Quartararo achieved even before he got into Grand Prix. People have long memories when a rider does something special like Acosta did last year, wins all those races as a rookie and things like that. They'll forgive the odd wobble, the odd bad season because they know the talent is there. And I think that, he's still, this hasn't in any way kind of derailed his rise to the top. I think that, he will do the normal procedure of at least 2 years in Moto2, which is normal. I mean, jumping like Fernandez did, or as Keith was saying, people jumping from Moto3 to MotoGP, that's not the normal way you do it. Normally it's 2 years in Moto2 and then MotoGP. And I think he's firmly on course for a great year next year. And then, you can be sure there'll be a lot of MotoGP teams knocking on his door. Although he seems to sound like he wants, he's ready to stay loyal to KTM. And, they'll have first pick on him, I'm sure.
Well, Moto2 looks like it's certainly going to be exciting as well for the second half of the season. Top 3 separated by 1 point. So it is tight in that championship too. Although Acosta might be out of the hunt for now, still 9th in the standings, top rookie. So another season for him beckons. Now, unfortunately, another season will not beckon, will it, Keith, for Suzuki, who have officially now, statement out there, confirmed, agreement with Dorna. They will part ways and end their participation in MotoGP and their endurance operation as well at the end of this year. I mean, it's just more sad news to compound what we already knew, but it seems like they've come to some sort of financial agreement somewhere.
Maybe they needed the endurance money to pay off Dorna for the MotoGP situation to get out of it. I mean, I can't see, they won't be out of endurance completely. There are other Suzuki teams that they will be factory backing. I'm fairly sure that will continue. But the actual full factory team, as Hamamatsu, underwritten, is no more, which really I think that's probably significantly a bigger deal than them pulling out of MotoGP, to be honest with you. I mean, they were so embedded in the Endurance World Championship. I find it astonishing. And the way that it came out, just that little one line that was in there, you kind of think to yourself, crikey, that's almost unbelievable for us old stagers. That my mate Julian Ryder will be absolutely bloody beside himself with something like that, because he's an endurance stalwart for endurance kind of people that follow it as strongly as they all do, and it's been really strong this last couple of years. Endurance racing has been just spectacularly good. For them to pull out of that as well, but I think again, I've touched on this several times. I mean, because of the war, because of the financial situations and so on and so forth, it is having a massive effect in boardrooms on the other side of the world. The cost of running these teams, the cost of being at that level is so high. Suzuki, having only just signed a new 5-year deal with Dorna, it's going to cost them a load of money to get out of it, I'm sure, and Dorna will have come to a reasonable gentleman's agreement with the Japanese. But the fact they pulled out of it, only having signed it off just a few months ago, is remarkable. It's almost knee-jerk, but I think that the world economy is in such a situation at the moment. The smaller factories like Suzuki have had to take this massive, massive couple of steps. It's actually a bit scary, really. I mean, I hate being the doom and gloom, monger, if you like, for the world situation, but I still think we've got more of that shit to shake out, is a fact. And I think that there is still, when you see Aprilia doing what they're doing, very small factory coming on good, but everybody will be looking to the books at the moment for coming on. I see, in British Superbikes, we've just had that mob from Rich Energy pull out of their situation in BSB, which is an astonishing situation, or maybe not, if the history of that particular sponsorship deal has always been a bit tricky. But I think we're going to see more and more of it as we move on through the formulae across the board. We've been here before, remember, with world recessions and stuff where it's really affected racing. To the point, you can go back, if you like, as far back to my day, where Superstock was the top class in the UK when the financial markets were aware that that's an extreme, I know. But the fact of the matter was, Superstock became the only class, the top class in the British Championships back in the day. I hope it never gets to that situation, but we are in for a very difficult time when this lot shakes out. We're in the summer at the moment, the sun's shining, everybody's feeling okay, and everybody's sort of sat around with a beer in their hand, albeit more expensive beer in their hand. But when we get into the winter and everything hits the fan, when suddenly energy bills and it's not, I know energy bills at home are difficult for people, obviously, but it's the corporate energy bills as well, to run these factories, to run you've got wage constraints, you've got all these things coming through at the moment that come the winter and the reckoning for 2023, it's going to be a very, very frightening winter, I reckon, for teams.
Well, I mean, Pete, I thought it was very interesting what Toshihiro Suzuki said in the statement as well. They want to reallocate resources on other initiatives for sustainability as well. So that is clearly another major factor, which I know Keith has picked up on as well when the news was originally announced a few months ago. So compounded with the world's efforts going on, that push for sustainability and the relevance, I suppose, of these prototype bikes is not there with the road bikes either for Suzuki perhaps at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a warning, not just for MotoGP, but all motorsport championships, that some factories see motorsport in general as expendable now. This is basically Suzuki closing their factory racing activities, isn't it? That's basically what's happening with this statement, as far as I can see it. So, because as you say, they want to reallocate those resources, and you see sustainability, if I can say it. You've got MotoGP going to these carbon-free fuels in 2024. Well, that work will need to start in 23. So you would have thought, well, the sustainability angle in MotoGP is already sort of coming on a bit, and yet, they've still, as Keith says, it's almost like someone's hit the panic button and they've all rushed out of the building in the first year of a 5-year contract. So I don't know. There's clearly more going on here, but I think really it's a bit worrying for any major motorsport championship. We've seen factories pull out of individual series, haven't we? Whether it's MotoGP, World Superbike, F1, whatever. But to actually pull out of all of them, it seems almost. I think they're going to support their global network of distributors, is all they say, isn't it? But I mean, that's Keith's reaction says it all. I mean, that's not. Distributors are not engineers. They're not going to be redesigning the bikes to try, and that kind of thing. as valiant as their efforts are in terms of promoting national racing, it's on a different level to factory support, factory engineering. So yeah, I think it's a big shock. And I think, where do all these Suzuki engineers go? You know, I think if I was Yamaha, you know, I'd be on the phone to some of these guys. We know that the corporate sort of mentality in Japan, you don't switch between factories, do you? But when you're effectively, your department is effectively being closed down here, you've got people who have made a big jump with that Suzuki engine. It's the same kind of configuration as the Yamaha. You know, I mean, what do you do if your option is, right, well, you're going to be moved to sustainability? I mean, what's that? So you go from designing Joan Mir and Alex Rins's engine parts or something to like an electric scooter or something. I don't know what the sustainability is. I mean, where's the attraction there for these top level engineers? You know, I think if, you know, it would be a good move by Yamaha. We'll never know if it happens, but you do wonder. You know, there's extremely talented people. Suzuki have a reputation for punching above their weight resources wise, don't they? They're quite a small racing department, as Keith says, not the only one, but they're certainly at the lower end of the MotoGP ladder in terms of resources and number of people, and they've done exceptionally well with what they've got. And yeah, let's hope those people, to be honest, can find other roles in MotoGP, which will mean going to other factories, because it does look like Suzuki and racing, it's over. I mean, you know, there was a hint, wasn't there? The Dorna announced, the Dorna website had that extra line in it back when the original statement came out, saying that other activities might also end. And that wasn't in the Suzuki statement that was sent to all of us and was put on the website. And it was like, well, hang on, where's this extra line come from? But there's no smoke without fire. And this is clearly what they had in mind, was also, as Keith says, this really important EWC project where they are extremely successful and have a great history as well. So yeah, sad day really for two-wheel motorsport.
Tell you what, that sustainability word's got a lot to bloody answer for, hasn't it, really, at the end of the day? Because there's a lot of people that are going to be struggling under sustainability. I mean, I look at the broadcast side of things. If you look at broadcast people now that move around the globe to follow, you know, you'll be able to pick up on this, Harry, with the Formula One side of things, but certainly from a MotoGP point of view, there are going to be less people producing these programs, sending us the pictures. A lot of people now are working from their home nationality base remotely. There are only a skeleton staff almost for some of these broadcasters now that are on site, while the rest is being produced back at the base. Now, there's several reasons for that. Obviously, environmentally, you know, to have BT, for instance, which I can quote fairly easily, had something like 26 people that flew around the world to all of these circuits. That's a huge amount of carbon footprint. And when you're going for the Albert Award, I don't know whether you've ever heard of the Albert Award, but if you look at the end of each broadcast, it will be, this is an Albert Sustainable Production, or something along those lines, which basically is aiming towards some kind of carbon neutral thing. Now, as far as I'm aware, it's only Sky that are anywhere near like carbon neutral. They really have invested massively in a carbon neutral environment to their buildings. Everything is very, very well thought through, but it's something that momentum has picked up on. So broadcasters are sending less people, making them travel less. In fact, a whole, I think, 18 months of BT's broadcast was done with all of the main staff working from home, just a skeleton staff back in their London base. You'd have a director in Norwich, you'd have a producer somewhere else, and graphics person somewhere else. Remarkable technology to make that happen. Then you've got the sustainability thing with the factories, which we're more interested in at this moment in time. In that, will it be towards the fuels, or will it be towards electricity, or will it be some other technology that Suzuki are particularly working on to move forward with sustainability? I mean, I still think the jury's out on all this so-called sustainability stuff. You know, we're all banging away with electric cars here, there, and everywhere. But I just have that horrible, well, not horrible feeling, I had quite a good feeling that you know, there will be other technology that comes through to challenge that. Doesn't seem that long ago, everyone was banging the drum about diesel. You know, diesel had concessions, and it was and all of a sudden, oh, hang on a minute, no, it chucks out all that horrible smoke and noxious stuff, and we want to ban it and put the prices up. It's, I don't know, I just feel that this is nowhere near yet worked all the way through. Electric cars are okay, they're good for city centres and so on and so forth. It is definitely good from the end user point of view, and from the people that are, you know, have that kind of stuff up their nose in cities and towns. But I wonder whether overall it is as good for the planet as everybody keeps banging on about. When you look at the resources that are being used up to produce batteries and and special metals and the like that make this thing work better. Maybe technology will move on and it will become a much better situation environmentally. But I still think that sustainability is it seems like such a small word, sustainability, compared with what it actually refers to. At the end of the day, we are going to have more stuff that we will be working with over the next 5-10 years. I'm bloody sure of it. And I think that Dorna are moving towards fuels rather than the battery powered vehicle.
And I just happened to see on my inbox just before this, I get the odd F1 press release comes in. You might have seen, Harry, this Mercedes talking sustainable aviation fuel. They've done some sort of agreement there. Again, this is following on, as Keith says, they're going for the fuel side of things and trying to clean up the fuel rather than looking at sustainability from that side, which, as Keith says, is the way that MotoGP is going. They're looking at
you're not going to have electric aeroplanes, Pete. They ain't going anywhere.
You say that.
We'll only be able to get from Northampton to Brighton.
Well, yeah, they pull the plug out the wall, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
So,
Need a hell of an extender.
Everyone at the back will have pedals. In economy class, you'll all be pedalling. We'll be like hamsters.
If it brings the price of your ticket down.
I doubt that.
But it's something, no matter how you feel about it, it's clearly something that, as you say, Keith, it's on the broadcast side, but it's on the factory side as well. It's how paddocks are operating. The question, I suppose, now is, and we've had a couple of questions come in on this, is there a worry that more will follow, or is this going to have a knock-on effect? Jamie Davis has actually said, should all these new tech devices be banned? If it costs to develop them and everyone uses them, the advantages become minimal. It's not really, well, he asks, is it that sustainable? We've already lost Suzuki. Could soon be back to the CRT days if it continues.
Well, I think Jamie's got a good point, but I think the actual track stuff is not the issue. I think it's what's going on in the wider world. I think that
Right.
The Suzuki have been massively impressive with what they've achieved technically on track against bigger factories and bigger money. I think the problem is taking a guess right now at where our world is headed, where we're heading in the future. Hamamatsu will be working towards what the next big deal is for their production, for their engineering, for where they're. It's almost taking a punt when you're a smaller company, I think. KTM, I mean, if we go back to the staff thing that Pete quite rightly dropped on a minute ago, I mean, there are some talented people, not just riders, obviously, but engineers trackside and back at the factory. If you think back to when KTM came on the scene, there was a massive, massive drought of talent because they sucked everybody out of the paddock. All the top guys were offered deals to go to KTM, and quite a few went to KTM. But then, of course, we're at the opposite end of that now. Those places have all been filled. Now, all of a sudden, we lose a team, and a void will be filled at some stage. It kind of brings me to I know this is random, but Neville Doyle, who we lost just recently. Neville Doyle, who was Australian Kawasaki top deal back in the day, factory man that worked his way through. And if you think back to the Kawasaki days when they were involved in MotoGP in the smaller classes mostly, but they were up into 500s at one stage with a very trick motorcycle. But even the might of Kawasaki back then, Kawasaki Heavy Industries is a massive, much bigger than Suzuki. But even they didn't feel back then that it was the way to go when it came to MotoGP. The amount of money and where their marketing was going, they felt they were better limiting it to World Superbike. Haven't done too bad, have they, in World Superbikes, really? And at the end of the day, you can understand their strategy. But rounding back to that question that you just said, is this the first of many? Do you know what? I don't think that's a daft question. I think that boardrooms are going to be looking at this. They are going to be looking really closely at where this is headed and taking a much more point-by-point, fine, detailed look at where they want to be in 4 or 5 years' time. Maybe you won't see anybody else jump ship like Suzuki have at the moment from Dorna, but I would suggest that at the end of the deal that they're doing, and most of them have done these 5-year deals, haven't they, fairly recently, By the end of that 5-year deal, that's when it's going to be the massive crux. That's where Dorna are going to have come up with some really sustainable plan for the renewal of those contracts back then. Otherwise, we're going to see MotoGP crash off the edge of a sustainability cliff.
Well, go on, Pete. Sorry.
I was just going to say, yeah, it is. The key here is to try and understand, and it's really difficult because we're trying to do it as well, why exactly Suzuki have made this decision. And we're still not exactly clear. We've got these vague sustainability thing, as Keith explained, which can mean an all manner of things. But Dorna will have to really kind of preempt this, jump ahead of this, and sort of address something before it comes up in other boardrooms, is what I'm saying there, I suppose. So they need, MotoGP needs to understand what's happened here, take steps to kind of head that off so that other board members, other boards don't have that same kind of conversation, and hopefully
I think that's why this has taken so long for the official conversation to have come out in a press release. I think that Dorna have gone into minute detail with Suzuki as to why we've come to this reasoning. I think that they need to understand it as much as Suzuki obviously have come to understand it, and I think that is why it's taken such a long time. We talked about how much Dorna might have slammed Suzuki with a severance fee type of thing, but they might take it as this is a rather handy learning situation for Dorna to understand the problems that factories may have in the future. And this Suzuki situation, the collaboration between Dorna and Suzuki, and the conversation that they must have had over the last few weeks to get to the bottom of the detail behind why Suzuki have taken this rather huge step. It may be a benefit to Dorna for this to have happened now.
On a more positive note, or Edna King is trying to flip this all around with his question, and he said, given with what Aprilia have achieved this season after years of hard work, do you think that actually any other manufacturers might consider joining MotoGP, even with the considerable costs, the S word doing the rounds? Is it feasible?
Aprilia have great history of producing really, really good motorbikes. They're, good racing bikes. The smaller bikes have always been there or thereabouts. They've done a great job, on a par with the Suzuki situation, I think. They've turned it around. For a long time, we didn't think they were going to be able to do that. At the same time, Aleix Espargaro has peaked on this particular motorbike as well. And we've talked about Dovi can't make the Yamaha work. We've had other riders that can't make various manufacturers work. Maybe we've got a perfect storm at the moment with Aprilia. Let's see what Maverick does towards the end of the year, if he can pick up the pace again as well. If we've got two Aprilias that are performing, then I'll be a bit more of a believer regarding it's all down to Aprilia. Everybody is so close now, time-wise, technology-wise, even with the different, manufacturer configurations of motors and so on and so forth. I mean, Dorna have done a great job with the rules to get them. It's beyond me from an engineering point of view, how you get V4s, across the frame, 4-cylinder bikes and so on and so forth, to work so closely, to perform so closely to each other. I mean, it's fantastic. But Aprilia would anybody else come in was the question. I can't see it. Can you? I can't see BMW. I can't see I definitely can't see Kawasaki. I mean, God rest Neville Doyle at the end of the day for the history that Kawasaki have going right back in the day to, what were they, something like 8 times world champions in the 250 and 350 class, and they produced a fantastic 500cc bike for Court Ballington to run in the British Championship as well, as it turns out. Really trick motorbike back in its day, but again, the amount of funding, the amount of effort to make that work, I can't see even the big factories. I suppose the question is why did KTM feel that they needed to go from off-road bikes where they were massively successful and always had been, into spending so much money on a MotoGP bike to get it to where it is? The amount, I mean, they must be hemorrhaging money at the moment with the amount of effort that's going into their bikes, their teams. They threw the kitchen sink at it. I mean, KTM would be a good team to go and ask, or be a fly on the wall to find out what their thinking is at the moment, whether they're going to reel back or whether they're going to keep ploughing on, trying to make this bike a world-dominating machine.
I think things like the standardization stuff helped, didn't it? I think, the standard electronics, the one-tire rule, I think without that, KTM wouldn't have come in, and maybe the others, Aprilia wouldn't have come back. Suzuki. The thing those three all have in common, isn't it, is that they had quite a lot of racing experience in other World Championship classes. They weren't, they've been successful for a long time. Suzuki, Aprilia had that CRT bike that they kind of were keeping sort of one finger in MotoGP with, whilst also racing with Max Biaggi and those guys. The superbike, the RSV4, which was pretty high tech as well. So all I mean by that is that it wasn't a massive leap, which I think it would have to be to answer the question. For someone coming in now, you think, well, there aren't any manufacturers that are really dominating in the smaller Grand Prix classes, for example, because in Moto2 now you're a chassis manufacturer, aren't you? You're not an engine manufacturer and things like that. So it's going to be a massive task for someone to come in and to pitch that idea now with all the uncertainty that Keith explained earlier. Tough one to sell, I think, to a board. Maybe there would have to be another step in terms of standardization, something else where you remove that uncertainty. But you get to the point where they all have the same bike, wouldn't they? You'd end up with Moto2, basically. So it's trying to balance the cost and the prototype side, isn't it?
Maybe they'll all go back to Superstock like they did in 1986 over here in the UK. No money left. We're all going Superstock racing. Bring back Danilo Petrucci. He was fast on a Superstock bike.
Stranger things have happened.
Of course. I don't see any of that happening, but...
Well,
it'd be nice to see Danilo back, though.
Who wouldn't? What a lovely man. And you can check out the exclusive Danilo Petrucci chat that Pete did on the Crash YouTube channel and on Crash.net as well. It was a great chat, so check that one out. But to come back to Suzuki, well, they've said they do aim to continue their support for their customer racing activities through their global distributor network. But from a factory perspective, at least at the moment, they have officially ended their MotoGP participation and their Endurance World Championship operation at the end of this season. What will happen to all the men and women in that team? Both Mir and Rins look set to join Honda, so it looks like from a rider perspective at least, they have work for next year, but still a lot of questions and I think a lot of worried people at the moment. So our thoughts are with them, and hopefully things do start to take a slightly more positive turn towards the second half of the season. There is a little bit of positive news, though, from Honda, Pete, in the form of Marc Marquez once again. Another update being provided by them. He's taken an important step in his recovery. Looks set to begin physiotherapy and some cardio work by the sounds of it. So it's all going fairly well, but the operation was a success, and it seems like he's making a good recovery and might well be back when he wants to be by, well, maybe before the end of the season.
I think that's certainly a possibility, whether it's or back on a MotoGP bike, let's say, whether it will be in a test or whether it will be in a race. Let's see. I think, yeah, this was the 6-week checkup, which was quite an important one. As you say, basically all going to plan. I mean, you're never going to get a statement. We know, because obviously Marc's been going through these kind of recoveries for 2 years. You don't hear anything negative, let's say, unless there's some action taken, like when he had to have surgery because of the infection. But what this tells us is that everything is pretty much going to plan. It doesn't really tell us when he might be back on the bike. I think, again, we've got to look at the things like he'll be on a dirt bike, then he'll go through that whole procedure again, which sort of ends with him riding that RCVS, the production bike, because obviously the testing rules mean he can't ride his real MotoGP bike. So he'll ride the production bike on a track day, and that's when we'll know that at the back of his mind, it's, right, I'm ready to come back. So that's the thing to look for. But at the moment, yeah, it sounds like it's all going to plan. And I think, the 2 dates, really this year is written off, isn't it, for obvious reasons, not only because of his injuries, but let's face it, the Honda now, there's no point in rushing back to get on a bike that is struggling. So his priority now is going to be developing next year's bike. You've got the test in Misano in September, which is not far away, is it? It's less than 2 months probably. And then there's only a 1-day test at Valencia after the season finale. So it's, and that's at the start of November. And that's it. Really, that's the end of the MotoGP track activities officially for this year. So things are ending earlier this year. They're not going to do a test at the end of November like they did in the past. So those are the 2 chances for Marc to get on the bike, try out the prototype parts for next year. And really, if it's needed, there's time to make major changes before testing then begins in Sepang, end of January, start of February. So I think that's, I think he's still sort of on target to be to be at least one of those tests, you've got to believe. Will he do race weekends? I don't know. I mean, the thing is, the Valencia test is one day. I mean, what if it rains? And that's a big gamble. You know, he'd be off a bike for so long. So it wouldn't surprise me if he did the Valencia race weekend, for example, just to get to know the 22 bike. And then he can get on. It'll be a packed day, obviously, that one single day. If the weather's good enough, get on with trying the 23 bike. So because to try and, try the 22 bike in the morning, jump to the 23, we know Honda, they'll probably have about 2 or 3 bikes for him to try as well. That's a lot to fit into a one-day test. So yeah, I wouldn't surprise me if we do see him back, even if it at a Grand Prix weekend, even if it's just to kind of get a head start on the testing side of things.
Marc Marquez is Marc Marquez, but at the end of the day, he's not been on a motorbike anywhere near like as consistently and for as long as he has been. So at the end of the day, he's got to find out his own form again. He's got to find his own form, his own style that's going to work with the injury that he's got and the fact that he's going to be race rusty. Suddenly getting on a motorbike that you've got limited testing with, and you're right, if the weather comes into it as well, then that limits your testing even more. To make predictions that you've got to then get engineered, I always hark back to the Yamaha thing. When Yamaha were looking to run that extra team, when the Razlan Razali team out of Sepang, when they were looking to run that, they needed June. I think it was June the 26th. I think was the date they needed to know by how many bikes they needed for the following year. That was the lead-in time for engineering for the following year. So the changes that Marc may well want with the 2022 bike, 2023 bike, they might not be able to do the kind of things that he needs or what he thinks they need. And then thinking you need something, how many times have there been these modifications done and they're junk by the time you get them to the bike? They don't work. It's not like it used to be where you had endless amounts of testing to be able to fine tune, easy for me to say, your motorcycle, or even least bloody work out whether you were going to have new bits engineered, manufactured, thought about, put on the bike, tested, tried. I mean, Marc Marquez is going to be up against it in 2023. He's going to come back on a motorbike that's not really his anymore, that's not been developed under him as much as it would have been in normal circumstances. And he's going to have that injury that he's got to be coming back from as well and getting himself back race bike fit. Bike fit is everything. Doesn't matter how much you do in the gym, doesn't matter how much you do, running around in circles somewhere. It's on the bike that counts. It's pushing that limit all of the time. Finding that limit, being able to control that limit like he could so unbelievably well for so long is going to be a tough call, even though he's Marc Marquez. I can see it. It's going to be quite different. I think he's going to have quite a struggle with it. I'm going to have to cut that just there because I've just got to answer this door.
I thought I heard a knock at the door.
Is it Pecco?
Is it Pecco? He's really not
hang
happy.
on a minute, Keith. Yeah.
Or actually, we should get Pecco on. He clearly knows who we are now. All right, well, funny.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Sorry about that.
Well, anything good?
I had to let someone in.
It wasn't Pecco.
No. Pecco's camping out in my back garden. He's camped out the back there, and he likes me so much now. He's Airbnb. He's staying at my house during Silverstone.
He's getting ready for it's a long time ahead. Nice little holiday at the Huewen.
Pecco, I have to say that how it all come about. I mean, I want to be when I talk with you guys.
Should we just caveat this? Just because we are recording, so should we just caveat this and say, obviously, in last week's show, we spoke about Pecco Bagnaia and his being pulled over and crashing his car and being found to be over the limit. And Pecco didn't like initially what Keith had to say about it, but then you did have a nice little chat and you reached out about it and cleared the air, and he was all fine with it in the end.
Pecco's a gentleman. He's a very fast motorcycle racer, and I have huge respect for him, obviously. I have to say that initially, probably not quite the other way around. I don't think it was reciprocated quite so well. I think the problem is with social media is that quite rightly, Crash, anybody else it might be, highlight the key word, and the key word was idiot. If you're called an idiot on a social media site as esteemed as the likes of Crash or whoever it might be, it kind of gets your attention. Do you have time to watch the podcast or read the transcript that goes with it that I think Pete does so well? Probably not. And of course, what he did was he got straight on social media and did what we all did and fired one back at me, which was quite polite in itself. I've got to say, it was as far as a he said, you know, have I ever been rude to you? I expect the same kind of respect. Well, he has my respect. Clearly, he does. But the snag was that he hadn't listened to the podcast until after we conversed, and then he had listened to it, and he, although he's not going to ever agree with the word idiot, maybe it has a slightly different translation in Italian to the one here. You know, we've all been idiots at something at some stage, and it's a fairly mild thing to be called, I've got to say. But he obviously took an exception to it at the point when he saw it as a headline on our crash piece, and got in touch. But since then, we will meet at Silverstone, which is our next round, at round 12 coming up, and all is cool in the Bagnaia Huewen camp, it would seem, at the moment. I mean, if you think about it, he's going to be feeling fairly battered. He's made a mistake. Drink driving is not an issue that you can hide away from anymore. It's a major issue, particularly if you're an advocate, you're a racing, you know, rider, driver, whatever it might be. Getting caught drink driving is probably up there when it comes to the list of no-nos. There'll be pushback from sponsors and people involved, you know. But like we said last time, Pete, this could be turned, you know, you highlighted it. This could become a massive positive. You know, it could be used as a massive positive for that zero tolerance on drink driving and so on and so forth. You know, causing him pain through his profession, I think, is the wrong way to go. Using him through his profession to promote no drinking, you know, zero tolerance on drink driving is the best way. Everybody wins out of that. There's no way he's ever going to do it again. You know, it's not like he's a serial, you know, gargler, for want of a better phrase. It's not one that he's ever likely to do again. He got caught out. He made a mistake, and he will pay for it from a legal point of view. But hopefully, from a professional point of view, you know, he will be allowed to treat it in the manner it should be treated in, highlighted as something you don't do, and promoting zero tolerance when it comes to drink driving, as I hope we all do.
Absolutely. And after all of that, we can now count Pecco Bagnaia as a listener to the podcast. So, you know, there's always silver linings somewhere along the line. Let us know your thoughts, Pecco. We always appreciate your questions coming in as well. Let's come back, though. Let's end. We were talking about Marc Marquez. So let's just round out with that, because there's a question that has come in from Joseph Musa, Keith, just on everything you were talking about there, really. Can Marc Marquez, if he's given the good enough bike, will he still be able to compete at the top?
The problem you've got is it is a good enough bike. You know, maybe like the Yamaha, it's a good enough bike to be a world championship winning motorcycle in the hands of Quartararo. The Aprilia is a good enough motorcycle to be giving the Yamaha a hard time in the hands of Aleix Espargaro. You know, unfortunately, it's that fine now. It's so close now. And certain riders are able to achieve from the same motorcycle as their teammate something more magical, something better. And that's the problem Marquez has got. Will that Honda and he gel together again as quickly as people are expecting it to do? I don't think so. You know, personally, I think he's going to find it very, very hard, frustrating. You know, he's a year older again. The operation he's had on his arm is massive. You know, he's been away from racing motorbikes for some time. All the doubts and all the things that go on in your head normally, in a normal paddock situation, just walking through the paddock, you know, you have your brain switched on all the time. Can you imagine being Marc Marquez? His brain must be in overdrive at the moment. What he's going to try and achieve, the program that he and Santi Hernandez, his crew chief, are going to go through to try and get back to the kind of pace that he needs to get to. And that's before you even try anything. He's got to get to a race pace, a testing pace that is beyond most people before you can even start developing or thinking about the next things. Because if you develop something when you're a tenth of a second off the pace, as soon as you get that tenth of a second back, you're going to want to change everything again. Racing motorbikes evolve through the pace that you go at. It's one of my massive criticisms of racing journalists. When you get, you know, I won't mention names because it would be disrespectful, but you know, a journalist that's riding a race bike around a racetrack, doing a test on it, and commenting on a motorbike when he's 5 seconds off the pace. It's impossible. That motorbike will be a completely different motorbike to the one that's 5 seconds on the pace. You know, the likes of Neil Mackenzie or somebody like that doing a test, or even going back in the day to Matt Oxley, at least he could ride a motorbike at a fair pace. So you would get a decent review of what the bike was doing and how it moved. Move that on to the alien status, which is where Marquez is. You know, 1/10 of a second makes a massive difference as to how that motorbike will perform in his hands. So he's got to get right there, right on the edge, pushing the whole thing, the front moving, the back moving. You know, he's got to be right on it before he can start making engineering advisories into the team. And it can't be done in the amount of time they've got. The testing that is so limited now. So Marc's going to have to come back on a motorbike that won't be 100% right for him, but whether his mercurial skills will be good enough to get him over that hump, we're all going to find out. We wait with bated breath. You know, I'm not going to say that he's not going to be capable of doing it, but I think he's going to have a very tough few months to get that Honda where he needs it to be.
And the big question, isn't it, that we're just not going to know is, well, until he gets on the bike, how much better is his arm going to be? Is it going to be 10% better, 50% better? It's obviously not going to be like a normal arm ever again. You can't imagine from all the work he's had done on it. But, you know, how much of an improvement is this going to be? Is it just going to be a very minor thing, or is this actually going to be a game changer in terms of putting him back to the kind of Mark he was before? You know, and then you've got all the stuff with the bike as well. Now, we know he was fast enough. He probably could have won COTA, couldn't he, this year? And if he continued, he may well have won Sachsenring, because you could give him, I don't know, a crate full of metal and a couple of wheels, and he'd somehow win on it, wouldn't he, round there? But, you know, Mark's going to be quick enough to win the odd races. The big question is he going to be able to get back to the level where he can win championships again? And I think we're not going to know until he gets on at least the RCVS, the production bike. And that's when he's really going to know, you know, how much better is this arm? And this is what it's all about, because as Marc said, he couldn't continue, could he? If it wasn't improving, he would have left after 1 or 2 years. So and bear in mind, he's got a contract for another 2 years. So Marc's saying that he might not have seen out the last year of his contract is a bit of a big thing for Marc, who never gives up, to say, and that tells you the situation he was in. So the first thing is the arm and how much better it will be. Fingers crossed it's a big improvement. But again, it's not going to be, I think, after all the work that's been done on it, it's never going to be like a normal arm, but hopefully it'll be good enough for Marc to overcome the problems he's had, the pain he's had up until this point.
Absolutely. Well, we'll keep you updated with all the progress on that. Keith has had enough. Clearly, he doesn't want to be here anymore. For those who are listening, he's just walked off. I think Pecco needs a cup of tea. I think it's tea time for Pecco. And Keith's off to making a cup of tea. Maybe by the power of editing, he might suddenly appear. You know what? We'll just end the show without him, shall we? Thank you so much, as ever, to Pete McLaren and Keith Huewen. Make sure you're tuned in across Crash.net for all the latest news and analysis across the week, and then we'll be back with you next week. He's back just in time for the end. Any closing words, Keith?
I'm looking forward to Silverstone coming up. It's scorching hot here. That was my air conditioner just being delivered. I do apologise, folks, but I'm getting raged at by my office at the moment because it's about 40 degrees in here, and so we now have a new air conditioner.
That is more than acceptable.
Yeah. Closing words, of course, Silverstone. The build up to Silverstone is the big thing now for me. It's everybody's on about it. I mean, we've had the Formula One Grand Prix there. It went fantastically well. Problem is, having had all this weather being as warm as it is at the moment here, the opposite side of that in the UK always is iffy weather. You know, it's going to come flying. And it's an airfield at the end of the day, Silverstone, so you can usually be fairly sure it's going to be windy and rainy on an airfield. That tends to be the way. So are we going to have a wet Grand Prix? Our predictions might have to be modified slightly.
Yes, it's been a while since it's done a prediction, hasn't it? Well, still a couple of weeks, but we will be building up for the British Grand Prix. We will all be there as well, I believe. So I'm sure if you're around at Silverstone, do say hello. But in the meantime, Keith's got an air conditioner to install. I've got an air conditioner to turn on. Pete's in Thailand, so he's used to the weather already. We'll see you back here next week. Get your questions in the meantime in the comments section, tweet, Instagram, Facebook us, just search Crash MotoGP. Please leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts, and we shall see you right back here next week with air conditioners. Bye-bye.